My brother sabotaged my career to keep me dependent on him. Now he's been exposed, ashamed, and begging for forgiveness. I'm 33, male, and I've spent most of my life feeling like I was a step behind, especially compared to my older brother B. He's always been the golden boy, good grades, great job, and seemingly endless success. Meanwhile, I've been in and out of jobs, struggling to make ends meet, constantly leaning on him for support, and he's always been there stepping in with money, advice, or connections whenever I hit a rough patch. The thing is, I never asked him to. I always thought B was just being the good older brother, helping me out when I was down. Lately, something hasn't been sitting right with me. It started with a promotion at work. I had finally gotten myself into a good place, stable job, decent pay, and I was on track to get a promotion that would have changed everything for me financially. I remember calling B about it, excited to tell him the news. He seemed supportive at first, but then he started pointing out all the things that could go wrong. "You sure you're ready for that kind of responsibility?" he asked. You've struggled with balancing things before. What if it's too much? I brushed it off, thinking he was just being cautious. Then a week later, out of nowhere, my boss called me into his office. The promotion? Off the table. No explanation. Just we've decided to go in a different direction. I was crushed. I've been working my ass off, doing everything right, and just like that, it was gone. But the weird thing was, he called me later that day, asking how things were going at work, almost like he knew. I didn't think much of it at the time. I was too busy wallowing in self-pity. A few months passed, and I kept grinding at work, trying to get back on track. Then one of my coworkers, a friend, actually dropped a bomb on me. He told me that B had been talking to our boss behind my back. He told him I wasn't ready for the promotion, that I was struggling financially and emotionally, and that it might be too much pressure for me. I felt my stomach drop. Why the hell would he do that? I confronted him about it, furious. We were at his place, and I'll never forget the look on his face. The guy had just caught him with his hand in the cookie jar. He didn't even try to deny it. "Look," he said, like he was doing me a favor. "I was just looking out for you. I didn't want you to take on something you couldn't handle." "Handle?" I snapped. "Who the hell are you to decide what I can handle? You sabotaged me. I was this close to turning things around, and you ripped it away from me." He shrugged, like it wasn't a big deal. "You're not ready? You've always needed my help, whether you want to admit it or not." That's when it hit me. This wasn't the first time he'd done something like this. Every time I'd started to get ahead, something had gone wrong. Every time, B had been there, swooping in with his help. It wasn't help at all. It was control. He wanted me to depend on him, to need him, so he could keep being the golden boy, the one everyone looked up to. "You've been doing this for years, haven't you?" I asked, my voice shaking with anger. "Every time I've tried to get ahead, you've been there to knock me down." He didn't even flinch. "I'm just making sure you don't make mistakes you can't come back from. Someone has to look out for you." Couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was my brother, the guy I thought had my back. He was admitting, right to my face, that he'd been screwing me over for years, all under the guise of helping me. "You're a control freak," I said, my voice low. "You don't care about me. You care about making sure I stay beneath you, so you can keep being the successful one." Rolled his eyes. "Stop being so dramatic, guy. You've always needed guidance. Look at your track record." I wanted to punch him, but instead I left. I walked out of his apartment, got in my car, and just drove. My mind was racing. I felt betrayed, angry, and honestly a little ashamed. How had I not seen this before? How had I let him manipulate me for so long? The next morning, I woke up with a clear head. I wasn't going to let this slide. He had sabotaged my life, and it was time to expose him. But I needed proof. So I called the coworker who had tipped me off about B's meddling, and he agreed to send me the emails B had sent to my boss. They were bad, even worse than I thought. He had painted me as a financial and emotional wreck, someone who wasn't reliable or capable of handling more responsibility. He completely trashed my reputation at work. Armed with this information, I went straight to HR. They were shocked, to say the least. After reviewing the emails and speaking with my boss, they realized that I had been unfairly passed over for the promotion, but the damage had already been done. My boss didn't trust me, thanks to B's lies. And while HR was sympathetic, they couldn't magically make my reputation whole again. I felt sick. I'd lost a huge opportunity. And for what? So B could keep me under his thumb. But I wasn't done yet. I needed my parents to know what B had been doing. They had always seen him as the golden child, the one who had his life together, while I was the one who needed guidance. It was time for them to see the truth. I went to their house and laid it all out. Everything B had done, from the emails to the years of subtle manipulation. At first, they didn't believe me. They couldn't imagine their perfect son doing something like that. Then I showed them the emails. My father's face went pale as he read them. He did this? He asked, disbelief in his voice. Yes, I said. He's been controlling me for years, making sure I never get ahead, so I'll always need him. My mother started crying. How could he do this? She whispered. I could see my dad's anger growing as he processed everything. We need to talk to him, he said, his voice hard. The next evening, we all gathered at my parents' house. We walked in, clueless, probably thinking this was just a normal family dinner. But the moment he saw my dad's face, he knew something was up. What's going on? He asked, looking around. I didn't waste any time. You've been sabotaging me for years, B, and now Mom and Dad know. He froze. He looked at my father, then my mother, and then back at me. I don't know what you're talking about, he said, but his voice wasn't as confident as usual. Cut the crap, I snapped. We got the emails. We know what you did. My father slammed the emails down on the table. Explain this, his voice cold. B's face went pale as he looked at the papers. Dad, I was just trying to help him. Help? My mother cried, by ruining his career, by making him look incompetent. B's mask started to crack. I didn't mean for it to go this far, he said, his voice shaky. I didn't want him to make mistakes he couldn't recover from. I thought I was protecting him. Protecting him? My father shouted, you destroyed his chances. You made him dependent on you. And for what? So you could feel superior? He didn't have an answer. He just stood there looking down at the floor while my parents stared at him, devastated. You could see the realization hitting them. He wasn't the golden child they thought he was. He was manipulative, controlling, and had been screwing me over for years. You're going to fix this, my father said finally, his voice full of anger. You're going to make things right, and after that, you're going to stay out of his life until he's ready to forgive you. He tried to argue, but my dad shut him down. Enough, he said. You've done enough. After that night, B tried to make amends. He sent an apology email to my boss, admitting what he had done, and asking them to reconsider me for the promotion. My surprise, they did. After HR reviewed everything, they decided to give me another shot. I got the promotion, and with it a huge pay raise that finally put me in a stable financial position. But things with me weren't so easy to fix. He kept reaching out, trying to apologize, trying to explain himself. But I wasn't ready to forgive him. Not yet, maybe not ever. He had spent years controlling my life, and the damage he'd done wasn't something that could be fixed with an apology. My parents, too, started to distance themselves from him. They realized that they had been leaning on me financially for years, thinking he was just being the successful older son. But now they saw the truth. He had been keeping them dependent on his success, too, just like he had with me. My dad was furious, and my mom couldn't stop crying for weeks. It was like the entire image they had built of him had come crashing down. He didn't seem to understand the gravity of what he had done. Kept calling, kept texting, telling me that he didn't mean for things to go this far, that he was just trying to look out for me, for the family. Every time he said that, it just made me angrier. Like, how could he possibly think what he did was okay? How could he justify ruining my career and manipulating my life for years as help? A few weeks after the confrontation, he showed up at my place unannounced. I hadn't spoken to him since that night at my parents' house. I opened the door, and there he was standing on my doorstep, looking desperate. Please, he said, his voice low. Let me explain. You got it all wrong. I didn't want to hear it. There's nothing to explain, B. You screwed me over. You've been screwing me over for years. For what? Do I always need you? So you can feel better about yourself? Ran his hand through his hair, looking stressed. No, that's not it at all. I never wanted to hurt you. I didn't want you to make the same mistakes I did. What mistakes? I snapped. You've been the golden boy your whole damn life. What mistakes have you made that justify sabotaging your own brother? He hesitated, looking down at the ground. Then, for the first time, I saw something crack in him. I messed up a lot, okay, he said quietly. More than you know. All that success, it wasn't real. I frowned, confused. What the hell are you talking about? He let out a long sigh. Dad's company, it wasn't doing as well as I let everyone believe. I made some bad investments, took some risks that didn't pay off. I've been barely keeping things afloat for years. That's why I needed to make sure you didn't rely on them. I didn't want you to know, because I thought it would only make things worse for you. I thought I was protecting you from that. I stared at him, shocked. I had no idea. Our father's company was the family's pride and joy. Everyone thought B was killing it, taking over where Dad left off, keeping it successful. Now it turns out he was just barely holding it together. So you lied to me, lied to everyone. Then, instead of asking for help, you screwed me over to cover your own ass. I was fuming. His revelation didn't make things better. It just made everything worse. He wasn't just controlling. He was a coward, afraid to admit he wasn't as perfect as he pretended to be. He looked miserable. I didn't know what else to do, he said. I've always struggled. I thought if you knew how bad things really were, you'd just give up, spiral, end up worse off. I was trying to keep you on track, keep you from falling apart. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So you decided to ruin my chances of building a stable life? Control me? All because you didn't trust me to handle the truth? He nodded, looking ashamed. I know it sounds bad. I know I messed up, but I thought I was doing what was best for you. I shook my head, feeling a mix of anger and pity. You don't get it, do you? You spent your whole life pretending to be this perfect, successful guy. And in the process, you've destroyed everything around you. You ruined my career, lied to our parents, and for what? So you could keep playing the hero? He didn't say anything. He just stood there, looking at me like a little kid who'd just been caught doing something wrong. And in that moment, I realized something. He wasn't the golden boy I had always thought he was. He was scared of failure, scared of losing control, scared of admitting that he wasn't as perfect as he'd let everyone to believe. I can't forgive you for this, I said finally. Not yet, maybe not ever. Don't get to play the victim here. You've hurt me, B. You've hurt me and this family. And you've got a long way to go before you can even start to make things right. He nodded, looking crushed. I understand, he said quietly, but I'll do whatever it takes. I swear I'll fix this. I didn't answer him. I just closed the door. My parents eventually found out the truth about his mismanagement of the company, and they were devastated. My father couldn't believe B had lied to him for so long, pretending everything was fine when it was all falling apart. My mother, well, she was heartbroken. She had always seen B as the one who had everything together, the one she didn't have to worry about. After my parents found out the truth, it was like the final nail in the coffin for B's image. My father cut him off from the business entirely, stepping back in to try and salvage what was left. Disappointment in his eyes was something I'd never seen before. My mother barely spoke to me for months. Family dinners we used to have stopped, and any mention of him was met with awkward silence. As for me, I focused on my new role at work. The promotion was a fresh start, and I threw myself into it. The more distance I put between myself and B, the more I realized how much of my life I had let him control. It wasn't just about the promotion. He had been influencing every part of my life for years, always under the guise of helping. Now, without him constantly hovering over me, I felt a strange sense of freedom. He kept trying to apologize, sending texts, emails, even stopping by unannounced a few more times. But I wasn't ready. Maybe one day I'll be able to forgive him, but not now. Not after everything he's done. In the end, he lost more than just my trust. He lost the pedestal he'd built for himself. Our parents saw him for who he really was, someone who was terrified of losing control, even if it meant betraying his own brother. Life is quieter now. There's still a lot of healing to do, but at least I'm finally in control of my own future. And if you got a sibling like B in your life, maybe don't wait as long as I did to call them out. Trust me, it's worth it. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear them, so please leave a comment. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more stories like this one.